Alison Bechdel's Fun Home describes the life of Alison and her personal development from childhood to adulthood. A few things to note about Fun Home is that it does not follow a clear timeline. The events jump around a little bit. It's a graphic memoir, and the name of the novel comes from funeral home. Sexuality is a major theme throughout the entirety of Fun Home. In the novel, Alison tells her experience of self-discovery and self-acceptance. This contrasts the hidden and never-proved sexuality of the father. In the beginning portion of Fun Home, it was clear that Alison did not follow typical female stereotypes. She did not feel comfortable dressing or acting like what is typically thought of to be girly. Her cousins called her Butch, a nickname that she did not seem to mind. She related the nickname to being the opposite of a sissy. This led to her pointing out that she believed her father to be a sissy. Alison and her father contrast each other. They both try to change each other into what they secretly wanted for themselves. In Chapter 3, Alison revealed that she is a lesbian. In this chapter, she began describing her sexual orientation and the experiences that led up to her self-discovery. A quote from page 74 reads, "My realization at 19 that I was a lesbian came out in a manner consistent with my bookish upbringing." Alison did extensive research on homosexuality and read a ton of books before coming out to her mom. While Alison was aware and honest about her sexual orientation, the father's homosexuality was kept a secret. Alison first found out about this during a phone call with her mother. Gender stereotypes can be seen all over media, including in cartoons. This alters the minds of children, telling them they can only dress and act a certain way for their gender. For example, there's a big controversy over Timmy Turner's pink shirt. For some reason, it is believed that pink is for girls and blue is for boys. Timmy Turner goes against this stereotype. This led to him being bullied in school. Death is another very prominent theme throughout Fun Home. The title of the graphic novel is inspired by a funeral home that the family worked at. Working at a funeral home meant that the family was constantly surrounded by death. Being constantly surrounded by death kind of takes the shock out of it. They became used to being surrounded by something that to other people would seem a bit more intense. When Alison was nearly 20, her father was hit by a truck and died. Alison believes that it was a suicide. Although there is no proof, there are suggestive circumstances, such as the mother and father's divorce 2 weeks before his death. The theme of relationships is also largely represented in Fun Home. The entire novel surrounds itself with the interesting dynamic between Alison and her father. At first, the father is presented as strange and distant. Alison could occasionally convince her father to play airplane, which can actually be a bit painful. On page 3, Alison described airplane as a discomfort well worth the rare physical contact. This reveals that the father was distant. He was much more concerned with maintaining his home than establishing a relationship with his children. A quote from page 14 reads, "I grew to resent the way my father treated his furniture like children and his children like furniture." As the novel proceeds, Alison actually reveals that she was quite close to her father. McCloud's Understanding Comics introduces the idea that in comics and cartoons, characters are not drawn extremely realistic so that the reader will relate more. In contrast, there are also certain panels where characters are more detailed. Readers will not relate as much to these drawings. This can speak to all of the themes because if we identify with the characters, we share their feelings. Sexuality, death, and relationships are all human experiences that are fairly common, and we have all had to find ourselves in some way. Alison draws the characters in the novel in a way that we are able to put ourselves in their shoes. Most of Alison's drawings are done in a simpler cartoon style. Page 35 includes a drawing of Alison's first grade school photo. This drawing is unlike the other drawings of Alison in the novel. It's very realistic. This panel does not do much to evoke emotion. It was just showcasing the similarities between her family and the Addams family. In this specific drawing, the audience is not going to see themselves. They see the girl and what she really looked like. If you take a look at cartoons, you will find that although characters have distinguishing features, most main characters are still kept fairly simple. This causes the audience to relate to the characters and put themselves in their shoes. If a character is meant to come off as strange or weird, or if the author doesn't really want us to relate as much to that character, that's when they will add more detail and make them look more realistic. It's interesting to look back at cartoons and comics and see this. A noticeable technical aspect of Fun Home is the color scheme. Besides black and white, Allison chose for the only colors to be varying shades of blue. Blue sets the tone and feel of the novel. Some of the novel's themes are dark and blue can be a gloomy color. For an example, people always say, "Oh, are you feeling blue?" Meaning, are you feeling sad? That may be why Allison chose blue as the color for this novel. This article by Cassie Dunlop states that since blue is known as an emotional color, perhaps blue is used for the purpose of inadvertently providing some emotions to the reader simply by looking at the images. Looking at straight gray colors would have been boring and uninteresting, but with tints of blue, she is able to provide a slight difference and even a little bit of atmosphere in her work. Her story is an emotional roller coaster ride as she thinks back to her past and realizes things that she had never thought of as a child. The color blue is a good representation of the thoughts and emotions she had experienced from her past. Pages 118 through 128 of McCloud's Understanding Comics explains how in art, emotions can be made visible through lines. Whether the art is abstract or realistic, lines can be shaped in a way to evoke certain emotions. The direction and boldness of a line can also portray emotion. This drawing is really just a bunch of different lines in color, but they're put together in a way that tells a story. The reader looks at the lines as a whole and is able to discern the meaning of it. Some lines are bolder than others, putting more of an emphasis on certain areas. Alice's entire body is a bit bolder than everything else, pulling her away from the background. If you took all of these lines apart and put them in several different documents, they wouldn't make any sense, they'd just be lines. But when you put them all together, all in one page, they tell a story. This example using a trash can says that the same lines can mean different things, according to its context. The lines of the trash can imply that the trash is smelly, but if you put those lines, those same exact lines, on top of something like tea or a plate of food, it wouldn't imply that the food is smelly, it would imply that the food smells good or that it's having heat. These are the covers of both Fun Home and Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud and then Alison Bechtel. Themes of sexuality, death, and relationships are portrayed throughout the entirety of Alison Bechtel's Fun Home. The objectifying power of realistic arts, color scheme, and lines are technical aspects explained in McCloud's Understanding Comics and can be identified in Fun Home as well. We're excited.